So what is TPM? So third-party maintenance. It's really the nickname that the industry has given what uh, we do here, and it started in the 1980s, and it's something that has gained a lot of traction in the industry in the past 10 years or so. Um, it's common in a lot of other industries, as listed there: auto repair, industrial equipment, technology-based industries, specifically where there's support from the manufacturer, can be either perceived or actually is not cost effective, and is you know stacked against the end user. Um, and really the TPM market is something that the manufacturers kind of create themselves in terms of their very aggressive uh, release cycles of equipment. The generations tend to be shorter than what most end users want to get out of their equipment. And the TPM market is essentially grown organically to meet that need in the market for people who want to run their gear longer than the manufacturers would like them to do, right? A key point there, the fifth bullet point: provided without OEM engagement authorization, right? This is, something that's done that is not affiliated with the OEM, which, presents its own unique challenges, which we'll talk about, but it also has some, tangible benefits for you. TPM is a province of the secondary market, which basically means the secondary market is a euphemistic way of saying used equipment, or gently used, or lightly used, or pre-owned, or pre-enjoyed, however you want to slice and dice it. What the market really presents with is a lot of equipment that is prematurely disposed of, and what secondary providers in the marketplace do is they collect and aggregate that equipment, and they quality test it, and then they re-enter it into the market a second time, right? So, somebody who buys a bunch of Cisco switches and only uses them for 3 years, and and they buy a whole new set of Cisco switches, what happens to the old ones? Well, in most cases, they end up in the secondary market, where they're going to be quality tested, repurposed, and then pushed into the marketplace for other end users to get value out of them. And last bullet point on there: TPM pricing is market driven, right? The OEM pricing is set, maintenance pricing is set by the OEMs, right? They make that determination in terms of, from their business standpoint, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. But for the most part, an OEM doesn't have to worry about other OEMs providing OEM authorized maintenance on their gear, right? In terms of Dell EMC does not worry that HPE is going to sell their authorized gear, because they don't allow them to do it, right? So there's no competition when it comes to OEM maintenance pricing, or true competition for the gear that you have. Whereas with TPM, there is market competition, right? There's multiple providers that can provide TPM support on a device, and that's an important consideration, an important benefit that a lot of buyers simply don't understand, or don't consider when they're evaluating TPM, in terms of, the market-driven aspect of it is something that can really be leveraged for a lot of value. What is TPM not? It's not a fit for all devices. Let's just be perfectly honest with that, in terms of there's certain infrastructure devices out there that just have to be supported by the OEM, right? And the reasons are below. We'll talk about those. There's no technical escalation to an OEM when you're using a TPM. There's no automatic, hey, we're a TPM, we can't fix this, we're just going to give it to Dell to see if they'll fix it, right? That doesn't exist, and you shouldn't plan on that when you're planning to buy TPM. The parts come from the TPM supply chain and not the OEM supply chain, right? And what's interesting is that over time, secondary market supply chains have grown up in quality and capacity and capability to where most of them on bigger companies like our company, our supply chain um, is just as rigorously controlled and run as an OEM supply chain. In fact, we tend to think ours is probably more rigorously run because of the fact of what we do in terms of ensuring quality and making sure that everything that comes from our suppliers is going to be stuff that we can use and have value, right? But that's an important consideration in terms of, the parts in a TPM contract are not going to come from an OEM supply chain. And that's just a fundamental fact. Software and code is going to be limited to OEM policies, and OEM policies are all over the map in terms of what you're entitled to as an end user. It runs the gamut from, some OEMs with their certain product lines have absolutely no serial number entitlement, right? There's no entitlement restrictions. They just post it so that you can download it off the internet if you need to. You have access to it at any time. You don't ever have to worry about entitlement. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's OEMs that have completely draconian entitlement requirements that require you to have serial number entitlement on an active contract, or else they won't let you have firmware or software for that device, right? And that's part of what we do as a TPM provider is we keep track of that for all the major uh, infrastructure devices out there, the manufacturers, their product lines, and all that sort of stuff, so that you as the end user don't have to keep up to speed on that. That's what we do. That's how we can add value to your organization when you're considering TPM, and we'll talk about that shortly. And then licensed devices features are very difficult to support, right? And that's a device that has its operating license tied to the system board serial number or things like that. And those things are like Palo Alto firewalls, checkpoint firewalls. A lot of Cisco features and licenses are tied to serial numbers, right? And so they can be very, very challenging to handle from a third party basis, because the only way that you can get reauthorization on that device is to go through the authorized OEM channels and through resellers and things like that. So we advise people to steer clear of those types of devices with TPM. So then it comes down to a question of, okay, we know what it's good for, what it's not good for, then really, kind of who supports what, right? And this graphic is kind of designed to give you a quick visual understanding of really what should stay on OEM support and what are ideal fits for third-party maintenance. And I won't read the list. We'll make this deck available after the webinar, but it's again the message that you should be taking away is that TPM is a good fit on certain devices, right? And it really depends on the nature of the device, your use case, its point in its life cycle, and we'll talk about that in a future slide here.